Hello there and welcome back to this Flutter course where today we're going to be continuing Unit 1 where we're going over the basics of the Dart programming language. Today we're going to be going over variables. Last time we took a look at data types, and today we're going to be taking a look at how we can, all the different ways we can create variables. Really not complex. There are actually, I think, 4 ways. So yeah, anyway, without further ado, let's get into this. Alright, so here we have our PowerPoint where we can see about creating variables. These are the 4 ways. Can I just say, I have the best design, especially considering the fact that I used a stock design. But the important thing is that I have the best design. Anyway, so we can see here about creating variables. We have a couple of ways of creating variables. So in the first example here at the very top, we can see we have in optional. If it's in parentheses, it means that it's optional. We have modifiers. This can be a constant. So if we want to make our variable a constant, this is where we would put it. And then we have a type for the variables. This is the first way of creating a variable. So we give it a type and then a variable name. And then we can see here we have an example without any modifiers, int I. So this is the thing in bold, and this variable is of type int. So this int I variable is going to be of type int. Okay, pretty simple stuff. You probably have already seen that be done somewhere. Okay, so then in the next example, we have modifier and then variable name. So you'll notice the difference between is that in the first one we just had modifier and then type and then variable name, and the modifier was optional. In the second example, or the second way of creating variables, our modifier is not optional. We have to have a modifier there, and then a variable name. So the modifier can be var, final, or const, and yeah, I think that's all 3 modifiers. And so we can see here an example. We have variable I, and the variable in this case is going to be of type dynamic and not, an integer or something like that. So it's going to be of type dynamic. So that's just, in the previous lesson we went over what dynamic was. So it's going to be of type dynamic when we create it like that. Okay, and then finally we have, well, not finally, second to last, we have this third way of creating variables. So here we have modifiers, which are optional, and then the type, and then variable name, and then we immediately assign it a value. And so this doesn't actually change much over it being done the first way. Int I equals 0, variable is of type int. The only difference is that it now has a value automatically assigned to it at the time of creation. And then finally we have the fourth way of creating a variable, and this is going to be modifier, then variable name, and then equals to value. And so the difference between using the first method and, the second method and the fourth method is that, as you can see here in the fourth method, when we do var I equals 1, the variable type is automatically the type of the value. So in this case, it's going to be an integer. But if we do variable I without assigning it anything, then the variable type is going to be dynamic. So if we did variable I, then on the next line, something like I equals 0, and then after that on the next line, we did something like I equals and then a string, that's totally fine. It's not gonna give us an error because I is of type dynamic, right? But if, on the other hand, we did var I equals 1, and then on the next string we did I equals a string, then that's going to give us an error because I is not dynamic, it is of type integer. So that's the difference there. It automatically assigns that's type inference at play. So yeah, that's just something to note there. Okay, so enough with all this theory. Let's actually very quickly go and take a look at some of this in the code. All right, and here we are in the code. Let's create var. Let's do the first way first. Int I equals 0, and then let's just do print I. There we go. Let's do dart app.dart. There we go. We get 0. If we try to do I equals 0.0, we're going to get an error since it's not a double. There we go. Let's remove that. Okay. So then we can also do, now the second way of doing things is var I. Okay. Or actually, no, that's the third way, isn't it? No, the first way is like this, var int I, and then I equals 0, like that. Yeah, there we go. So you're going to see here that we're going to get I is already declared. Right, yeah, I1. There we go. There we go. We get 0. And also, everything still applies, so we can't do 0.0 since that's going to be a double. God, I can't type. Yeah, there we go. So we're going to get the error as well. Okay, now if we do var I1 on the other hand, we can do I1 equals 0, and then let's print I1. Okay. There we go, we're going to get 0, 0, but then now what we can do, I1 equals 1.0. So we're now changing it to a double, and we can do that because I1 is a dynamic, unlike I, which is an int. That's the difference there. Okay, and then the third way of doing this is where int I1 is immediately equal to, something like 1. And there is pretty much no difference between this and the first method, just that here we assign the value immediately, but then here we do it on separate lines. And then so here we can just print I2. That's going to give us 1. There we go. You can see that there. And then finally, the fourth way of doing it, var I3 is equal to 1, and then print I3. So here we're assigning, here this is pretty much the same thing as this, except here we're assigning, on the fourth method, we're assigning it a value immediately instead of doing it on separate lines. And there we go. Here we also get 1. And so the difference here is that while here we can change the type, if we try to do something like I3 equals 1.0 here, if we try to change the type, we're going to get an error. That's because it's not, this is an integer, and this is not a dynamic. So that is the actual problem there. So we have to get rid of that. And then now, finally, this is how it works. Yeah, those are the ways of creating variables in Dart. All right, so pretty simple lesson. We sort of blew right through it. Just hopefully you already knew all this stuff. Just, making sure that you know how it is in Dart, just so you have a clear picture of how to create variables. That's because that's, as you can expect, kind of important. Okay, other than that, then, that is actually all for today's lesson. Next time we're going to be going over operators in Dart as well, also speeding through that. So, yeah, I'll see you there. Till soon.